Also, notice how John reacted when Ashley caught him in his lie. He wasn't ashamed or embarrassed like you or I would be. No, John just shrugged it off and moved on, which is yet another hallmark of a compulsive liar. Is John Ramsey a compulsive liar? I'm deception detective and attorney trained in statement analysis. This channel exposes lies and manipulation. For more like this, please hit like, subscribe, and notifications. Today we're watching John Ramsey's recent appearance on the Crime Junkie podcast and counting his lies. I've only seen part of this. I want to react to it with all of you, so let's go ahead and listen.
To start, I feel like there is this perception that when you do kind of interviews that they're very orchestrated, or there's this party line and they're like, oh, John's so composed, or it's John's tales. And we reached out to you. There is no off the record on it, like you've told me.
I've done a number of interviews over the years, and my main reason for engaging the media is to keep pressure on the police to do their job. And I've never wanted the questions in advance because I want to respond spontaneously. If I have a made-up answer, then I'll think, what was my answer for this question? I'd rather just, ask the question and I'll spontaneously respond. And it could be, when did you stop beating your wife? And no boundaries, on the questions.
I got lots of questions.
Yeah. And so it's easier for me.
Yeah.
It's almost like I don't have to prepare.
Ideal. Well, I did prepare.
John never said he doesn't prepare for interviews. He just said it's almost like he doesn't have to. Nor did he say he'll answer truthfully, just spontaneously. And I think there's a reason for that, because his story about Christmas 1996 is a scripted lie. I'll show you why I think so in this video. But before we get too deep, just because I think John is a liar, that doesn't mean I think he's a killer. If you've seen my other videos in this series, you already know who my top suspect is. If not, don't worry, they're about to mention him, and I'll explain my full theory next.
It's almost like I don't have to prepare.
Ideal. Well, I did prepare for the both of us.
Okay, good.
John Bidet, she would be, we were talking about this earlier too, like she would be almost my age right now.
Yes, I realize that.
And what is that like? Like, what is she, when you picture her, she's stuck at 6, I would imagine.
Oh, absolutely. She's still my little girl, and I can't imagine what she would be like as an adult.
Do you feel like you're ever stuck in 1996?
No. I mean, I've learned two things. One, life's not easy all the time, and life's not always fair. And it's like, okay, those are the game rules. Let's keep at it. And one of the things I've noticed with families that have lost a child, and I've looked at this in some detail, I don't know what the percentage is. It's a majority percentage end up in a divorce. And for Patsy and I, we fortunately, what really got us up off the floor was the realization we have 3 other children now that need us desperately to be strong. They're hurt, they're crushed, they've lost. At their age, they shouldn't have to deal with the loss and death of a family member.
John mentioned his children from both marriages, but he's really talking about Burke. His other children were older when John Bidet died, and they'd actually already lost a family member. John Binet's half-sister died in a car crash. So when John said that's what got him and Patsy up off the floor, he may have meant that literally. Here's how I described it in my video, 4 words liars use. Based on my analysis, I think that Burke, who was 9 at the time, accidentally killed his sister. And then the parents had a decision to make. They had to decide, do we call the police? And now Burke is going to be known as the kid who killed his sister for the rest of his life. And this is going to follow him for the rest of his life, right? John Binet's already dead. Do we also throw our other son under the bus? Or do we cover up the murder? Do we stage a kidnapping and write a fake ransom note and then discover the body when the police get here so that both of us and Burke can get off scot-free? And I think that's what happened. John took Patsy aside and said, look, we're going to cover this up. Sit down. I'm going to dictate a ransom note to you. You're going to write it down. And in the morning, you're going to pretend to find this note and you're going to call 911. I know it might seem far-fetched, but it's far more credible than the Ramseys' version of events, which is riddled with lies. One of which is coming up next. See if you can spot it.
At their age, they shouldn't have to deal with the loss and death of a family member.
Do you feel like you're still in shock? Or do you feel like
you
if a
don't
good
get over the murder, the loss of a child. You move beyond it.
Did you ever give yourself time to have a pity party? Because if anyone deserves a pity
You
party.
do once in a while, yeah. Well, what was interesting was sometimes I'd be down, Patsy be up, and we sort of could offset each other.
We'll get into, I think, why they kind of looked at you guys as a whole. But even in looking at the family, I do feel like, at least initially, Patsy like bore the brunt of that.
She did,
And for like a
big
long
time.
time, I even watched something they did on Netflix a while ago called The Casting John Bonet. And there's like a line in there where the guy was like, oh, I bet she was probably a horrible bitch of a mother.
No, she was a wonderful mother,
And I don't know,
amazing mother.
why do you think they latched onto her so much? When I know that there was, if people want to have questions about what happened in the home, why is it her that everyone
I don't
became
know.
fixated on?
Patsy was a very strong woman. Maybe didn't come across so good on television, I was told by people. But she was a wonderful mother. She's a wonderful stepmother. And I never heard her say anything negative about anybody. She's just a good person.
We have our first lie, and they only get bigger from here. If you're not familiar, I categorize lies into 3 buckets based on the testimony oath. I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So there's lies of commission when someone fails to tell the truth. There's lies of omission when someone tells the truth, but not the whole truth. And finally, there's information treatment when someone tells the literal truth, but adds in other stuff like hedges, caveats, and irrelevant details to mislead the listener. In this case, John's claim that Patsy never said anything negative about anyone may have been a harmless exaggeration, but it was still a lie. And it revealed 2 important things about John, which are both associated with compulsive liars. The first thing it revealed is just how easily and casually John lies. He did it directly to Ashley Flowers' face, and he did it on camera. And the second is what he lied about. He wasn't lying to spare himself prison or to win $1 million. He was lying about something irrelevant and unimportant. Let's keep listening because the lies only get bigger.
And I never heard her say anything negative about anybody. She's just a good person. And so for her to take the brunt of that assault is just so unfair. When we lost John Bonet, she got very focused on Burke. I mean, that was our goal, was try to give him as normal a childhood as we could possibly give him amidst all this chaos that was going around us. We were afraid. Somebody had attacked our family. We don't know who it was. And we were frightened, quite frankly. And one of the challenges was we wanted to keep Burke out of video and pictures so that people would know what he looked like. And so how do we get him from, we were living with friends when we were in Boulder, so he could finish his school year. How do we get him to school without being photographed? And it became a project. In a way, it was diversion from grieving. We would send out a decoy car. Burke would be in another car on the floor in the back seat.
Just to go to school?
Yeah, to go to school. And we'd get him to school unphotographed because we wanted to protect him.
What were the kids at school like to him?
Well, the kids are wonderful. And
Really?
Oh, yeah. And
I feel like that's the first time I've ever heard that. Normally school-age kids are awful.
well, I say that, I mean, from my perspective, they seemed like they really were great.
Burke's classmates were wonderful. Really? Well, I guess I don't actually know. That's basically what just happened. And just like his lie about Patsy, the fact that he's loose with the facts about something so trivial somehow makes it worse. If John's this casually deceptive about the small stuff, how can we take his word about anything important? Also, notice how John reacted when Ashley caught him in his lie, or guesstimate, or whatever you want to call it, about Burke's friends. He wasn't ashamed or embarrassed like you or I would be if we got caught just making up answers, which is yet another hallmark of a compulsive liar. And that's because they rarely take what they're saying seriously to begin with. Of course, I can't diagnose John as a compulsive liar, I'm not a clinician, but I definitely can't rule it out, especially after this next part where John goes off the rails.
Well, the kids are wonderful. And
Really?
Oh, yeah. And
I feel like that's the first time I've ever heard that. Normally school-age kids are awful.
well, I say that, I mean, from my perspective, they seemed like they really were great.
Did you guys have any moments with him where you're asking, I think about like kids, like what are the things that the parents don't know? Like what's happening?
No.
You
You know your children.
Well, and I'm not even necessarily talking about like him doing something, but I'm
Yeah.
saying like, they hang out together, they have the same group of friends. Like, was there someone that maybe she didn't tell mom and dad about, but she's gonna tell her brother about, or her brother? Like, did you guys
Yeah.
have any of those like moments with Burke to be like help us figure this out?
No, because we really just wanted him to be separated from it, from the chaos we wanted him to be normal. And that was very difficult because being followed around by the media and going through the grocery store line and seeing your sister's picture on the front of the tabloid, it was difficult to give him a normal life.
Do you think he might still know something that he like
No,
doesn't even know he knows?
no. Burke's a very solid person, um, despite all. And went to college, graduated, had a good job ever since. Well thought of by his employers and very, very disciplined. Buys used cars and, not, he's a good adult and he was a good son. If he knew anything, it would not be something he would thought
Is important.
important.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I wonder if there's something in there, like, even so. I know in the Dr. Phil, one of the things that came out was the idea that you used a flashlight to put him to sleep, and that he came back down to play with a toy. Like when he's down and people are sleeping, has he ever talked? Like, did he get the sense that someone else was in the home? Did he hear anything? I don't know how long was he up?
No, we've never asked him that. I don't know. I didn't know, frankly, that he got up again.
Hmm.
I'm not sure he did. Again, that's fiction. There's so much fiction out.
Because it's just thrown out there. It's just Dr. Phil who says, you got up to play with a toy, and Burke says, yeah, I did. It was something that I wanted to put together. And then it kind of just like fades
Well,
away.
again, when we got home, John had fallen asleep.
But I know you and Burke
I put her
came.
to bed. Burke and I sat down and tried to put together one of his little toys for a little while, just because he wanted to, and then he went off to bed.
But you're saying like that whatever Dr. Phil said and Burke said on the show, he didn't come back down?
I didn't know that he came back down if he did.
Does
He
stuff
may
like
have-
that make you want to be like, oh my gosh, maybe there's something he knows?
Burke would have said something.
Lack of curiosity is the best tell for a hoaxer because the hoaxer already knows what happened. So it either doesn't occur to them to pretend to be curious in the first place, or they can't risk acting curious because that would mean giving up control of the narrative. As I pointed out in my last video, John and Patsy have claimed since day one that they didn't ask Burke if he saw or heard an intruder. Of course, that's already hard to believe because most parents would have at least asked just to be sure the intruder didn't say or do anything to him. But the notion that John still hasn't asked Burke about that night 30 years later, that's unbelievable, and that I literally don't believe it. And while I can't say for sure that it's a lie, I can at least say it's inconsistent with his other claims. For example, John has routinely said he's willing to do anything to find the killer. Yet he draws the line at asking his son a simple question. Even after Ashley brought up Burke's inconsistencies in his Dr. Phil interview, John showed zero curiosity or interest. So John's either lying about his desire to catch the killer and what he's willing to do to make that happen, or he's lying about his ignorance and not knowing what happened. Or, which is my opinion, he's lying about both.
Maybe there's something he knows?
Burke would have said something if something was weird, but
Okay.
he may have misunderstood the question
Sure.
too. That
Do you think Burke regrets doing it?
well, probably, but the things that were interpreted by the internet crowd, well, he's smiling. Burke talks with a smile.
Yeah.
Just the way he is. You ask him, what time it is, he'll smile.
Yeah, they lit him up after that.
I know it, and it was very unfair.
Do you think there's like one thing that those people who will never believe you like hone in on, or like one thing you're like, man, if we would have done this thing differently?
Well, I don't know if there's one thing, but we were portrayed as very rich people. We didn't consider ourselves rich. We'd built a little computer business, sold our interest to Lockheed, and
I mean, for like a pretty penny though.
but I got, that was more money than I ever thought I'd have in my
Yeah.
life, you know. But we didn't, I still was working, still figured I needed to have a paycheck coming in. And, but we were portrayed as I was president of a company that had done $1 billion in revenue. Well, we were a distributor, we're like a grocery store. You got to sell a lot of milk and eggs to make a little bit of money. And that was the kind of business we're in. So in our industry, that was not a huge business, but that was publicized a few weeks before John Bonet was murdered in the local paper. But they perceived, therefore, I must be a billionaire. Well, that wasn't true. I was an employee of Lockheed. But people don't like rich people. And we were portrayed as super rich, callous. Everybody knows rich people don't love their children.
John threw out some straw man arguments here, so let's quickly tackle them, and I'll explain why I think it's yet another indication that he's lying in a bit, so stick with me. First, John said that people originally suspected him and Patsy because they were rich. And while there are some people who have an irrational hatred or suspicion of the wealthy, I think most of the public is like me. They suspected the Ramseys because their story didn't add up. John also claimed that people suspect Burke because he was behaving oddly in his Dr. Phil interview and smiling too much. I actually analyzed that interview and I found Burke to be deceptive and evasive, and it had nothing to do with his body language. In fact, I agree with John about the unreliability of body language. Here's a clip from my video More Words Liars Use explaining my stance on body language in this case and beyond. The risks outweigh the benefits. The chance it will lead you down the wrong path by even considering it is too high. It's better to ignore it entirely because we want to get to the truth. And the truth comes through people's words because that's how we've evolved to communicate and how we've evolved to deceive. And I just want to make a caveat about this because I see so many comments, well, we've evolved to use body language. Yes. If I smile, it means I'm happy. If I fold my arms, yes, it can mean I'm angry. But besides that, it doesn't really tell you much. I could be angry because I'm telling you the truth and you're not believing me. Or I could be smiling because it's Duper's delight or just because I'm happy to be on TV. So it leads you down too many wrong paths.
Rich people don't love their children kind of people. I think. I don't know. And then we got into this child beauty thing, which Patsy and John Bonet had fun with it. And Patsy's philosophy with our kids was let them try anything they want to try. Patsy, when John Bonet she'd been maybe 4, I guess, was diagnosed, or maybe 3 or 4, diagnosed with ovarian cancer, stage 4, which has about a 5-year life expectancy, and that's it. And Patsy was so distraught, she'd say, God, why did you give me these beautiful children if you're not going to let me be here to raise them? But she was a fighter, and she beat it. She was in remission. For her, it was a huge gift that she could now perhaps look forward to being with her children when they go to college, get married, and have her grandkids. But I think deep down she knew that may not happen. And so she tried to cram a lot of mother-daughter stuff into their lives together. She was just a natural. She loved performing.
She's a stunner, yeah.
Yeah, that's just the way she was. And she'd put on little skits at home and make us interrupt our dinner and watch the skit that she and her friends put on.
Yeah.
So that was her personality. And they had fun with it, but it wasn't an obsession.
Yeah.
And of course, the media presented it as Patsy was this dominant mother who was living vicariously through her daughter, forcing her to do this stuff. That was nonsense. John Bonet had fun with it and loved it.
The pageants are yet another one of John's go-to straw man arguments because they really don't matter. If John Bonet hadn't done pageants, would you conclude that John and Patsy are innocent? Of course not. John has all the answers when it comes to weak criticisms like body language, absurd conspiracy theories, and innuendo. But what does he do when he's presented with clear evidence that someone is lying? Like when Ashley pointed out Burke's material inconsistencies in his Dr. Phil interview. Well, in that case, John is speechless. And I think this might be John's biggest tell of all. The only time he doesn't have a spontaneous reply is when the evidence hits too close to home. And it doesn't just happen with Burke. Pay close attention to this next part and watch John's reaction, because Ashley is going to point out inconsistencies in Patsy's story this time.
A lot has had to have changed over 30 years. Like when you think about like you're in it day one in the house, you think it's a kidnapping. How do you think differently now about the ransom note than you did day one?
Well,
Like at least I have to imagine, like, if it were me, I imagine that I've like picked this thing apart 10 ways to Sunday.
it didn't make any sense, first of all.
I know in some of the interviews they bring up for Patsy that it goes back to the note, and I think one of the reasons they keep those who believe she wrote it perpetuate the idea that she wrote it is because it seems like it's not a clear answer or direction of like how much of the note she saw. Because like initially she's, it's like your daughter, we have your daughter, and then she goes up and looks, but then she talks about later looking out the window and seeing that it's a marked car and being concerned. And people will say, oh, how did you know that, that was later on the note? People will say, oh, when she calls 911, how does she know how it's signed if she only saw the first page? 30 years ago.
Yeah, I don't know. It was chaos that morning, and I really thought I could get John Bonet back. I really did.
I was sleeping when my daughter mysteriously died, and my wife's story doesn't make sense. Oh well, I'm sure she has nothing to do with it. Maybe that's John's thought process, but it's not how actual victims typically act. Typically, they're suspicious to the point of paranoia. It's one of the reasons for the divorce statistic John mentioned himself. No, I think John's thought process goes more like this. I don't have an explanation for Patsy or Burke's lies, and I'm not curious about them either because I already know what happened. Plenty more in this interview, including questions about the ransom note, Gary Oliva, and other bombshells. Comment below if you want a part 2. Stay true.